How is everybody doing? Strength Chat episode 110, and today I have got a very special guest for you. Today I'm joined by a British weightlifter winning a silver medal at the 2018 Commonwealth Games. Today I am joined by the one, the only Sarah Davies. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Considering the circumstances, we chatted
Yeah,
just before the podcast started. I really wish that I had a garden, which would be really good right
yeah.
now.
The British weather's actually being quite kind to us, isn't it, given the circumstances? So
I know.
it's a change.
Although I suppose if it was raining and cold outside, I'd just want to eat a lot of chocolate and drink hot chocolate and not really.
Yeah, that's true.
Um,
That's
at
true.
least if it's nice, I want to eat a little bit better. So what's been happening with you? What's been going on? What have you been up to? How have things changed with you?
I mean, I was obviously in the full swings of Olympic qualification. When all of this kind of started, I had one competition left to do, which was the Europeans, which was scheduled to be next week. I should have been lifting on the 7th of April. So that obviously got pushed back to June. But the way it was going to go in is the Olympics at that time was still going to be on time, and they just changed the qualification procedure, and I was kind of sitting pretty in terms of my Olympic qualification, and it was pretty much signed and sealed. And now the Olympics have moved to some time next year, which we still don't know. We don't know how that's going to have like a knock-on effect of qualification and stuff. So it's kind of stressful because, like, 2 weeks ago I was like, oh sweet, like I've pretty much qualified, like I'm not really going to shout it from the rooftops till everything's confirmed.
Yeah.
Because I just want to wait for it. And now I'm at a point where, like, actually we might have to compete again to solidify our qualification and stuff. So it's a stress, and it's also difficult to like motivate for training and things when firstly we were in lockdown for 3 weeks, and then also you don't know what you're training for. The Europeans were supposed to be in June, but the likelihood of that now happening is probably pretty slim still. So, it's kind of, we're just kind of sitting and waiting. And I guess the most frustrating thing is the fact that we're only hearing about the Olympics the same time as everybody else. Like, we're not hearing about it first from the IOC or from, the International Weightlifting Federation. Like, the only thing we find out is when it's coming from the media, and that's the thing that's most frustrating for the athletes.
Right.
And not good really for the athlete from a mental point of view. We've done all this hard work for however many years to qualify, and we're not getting any sort of, not special treatment, but not getting any kind of consideration. It's just going to the media first, which is
I didn't
great,
realise
then
that because I
yeah.
saw the announcement and I was under the impression that maybe the decision had been made a couple of days before and all
No,
that. Oh wow!
so
Really?
I'd left my phone, I'd gone and done something, come back and pick my phone's blowing up with all these people messaging me, like my mom, like friends, loved ones, all of that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm finding out from people like that, like, and there's not been anything said, from higher up the chain, which is really frustrating. But
I can understand, the announcement going out. You've got to put the safety first of everyone involved, but especially from the athlete side of thing, you'd have thought that the organisation would have been maybe a little bit more on that. I know for a couple of people, obviously, as a lot of my clients compete in powerlifting. A lot of competitions have obviously been cancelled. My competitions have been cancelled. From obviously as a coach yourself and as an athlete, how have you managed, with the motivation for training, speaking with your coaches, and how you've been speaking with your?
I mean, from my point of view, like, I'm kind of going to use this 3 weeks to back off a little bit, because if the games are next year, like, so what would normally happen is we'd have an Olympic Games, then you'd cool off for a couple of months, go on holiday, not really do much training, and then you'd come back and have like a good 18-month block into like Commonwealth Games, because obviously it falls every 2 years. But now with the Olympics being next year, that's not going to happen. Like, the Olympics could potentially be in the middle of Commonwealth qualification. And then you've got like no real downtime to enjoy yourself. It's not even like I can be like, right, I'm going to take a holiday now then, because obviously we can't get anywhere. So it is such a tricky one from my, I am struggling with it from a personal point of view. So like I've moved back in with friends, so we've got a garage I can train at. So we're kind of locked down together.
Yeah.
So I can do training bits of stuff, but I'm gonna kind of just like bodybuild and maintain and kind of tick over and
Yeah.
not really do any of the Olympic lifts. Like I'll still do some squats and stuff, but I'm not gonna push my body to like limits when I know my head's not in it, because it's just a waste of time. So I'm going to use it as a time to do like physio exercises and all that kind of stuff, and just a bit of general conditioning. For my athletes, so like as a coach, I've been quite lucky that a lot of my athletes managed to get a competition in just before like everything went down. There was a couple of competitions here that were going on. So yeah, I guess I've been fortunate that they're now in a bit of a strength block anyway, that they can, start all over again, which would have happened regardless. I mean, there's a couple of competitions scheduled here for July for like those kind of lifters. Our British Championships is supposed to be in June, which is looking unlikely as it stands. Yeah, it's just a tough one, and I have to be thankful for my athletes that they have like stuck by me. They've not kind of gone, look, I need to pause my program, because obviously like as a small business, and like we don't get any funding from the government for training, so I have to be writing these programs to keep a roof over my head and to keep making money. So yeah, I have to be thankful to them for that. Really, a lot of people that I coach already had a home gym, so they've kind of had no change. But that some people have bought stuff, like, so I'm sponsored by MirrorFit, and they're like sold out of stock, like, so for companies like that, this thing's been great. But it is I can't find it kind of funny. You've got all these people who compete at like amateur level, and they're buying all this really expensive home gym equipment, and I'm just like, I'll be all right for 3 weeks, like I'll just tick over and this and that. And yeah, so
Yeah. I think
it's so difficult.
Yeah, I think the response from everyone has been really, really good to get kit, because I know, motivation can be a little bit lacking, but I've been doing some sort of online classes, and I had people trying to do overhead pressing with like 2 bottles of wine. Someone I was like carrying like picking their dog up. It's just making the best of a bad situation, and I think with everyone being in it together, the goals may change, if you like, but you can still do something. So for everyone listening who might not know your background, how you got into weightlifting and got into coaching and all that sort of stuff, just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself?
Yeah, so I started weightlifting September 2011. So I was at uni, and British Weightlifting had the High Performance Centre up there at the time, when we had all the funding and stuff into London. So I started weightlifting. Turned out I was quite good at it. Snatched 30 kilos, clean and jerk 40 kilos. The first time I've ever like done the movements, which to some people would be pretty frustrating to hear. But so I was 19, and I'd come from a gymnastics background, so I was already pretty flexible and powerful and stuff. So, and aware of my body. I think that's a big thing. Like, some people pick up weightlifting and they've not really moved their bodies like that before, so they find it a lot more difficult. So yeah, I started in 2011, and then competed in my first competition in the November, and then that qualified me for the English Championships in the January. I mean, back then you had to do a 90 kilo total to qualify at 63 for the English. I mean, now you've got to be snatching 90 kilos to be even in the medals, which is crazy. And yeah, I think the total now for the English is like 140 or something. So even in my time in the sport, like, the women's totals have gone up massively. And I won a medal at my first English because there was only 3 people turned up, like, at my weight class, because the sport then, like, weightlifting wasn't cool then. Like, weightlifting's cool now. And then I went to my first Europeans, my first big senior international in April 2014, and then my first Commonwealth Games that summer, which after just like 2.5 years training pretty much, was kind of cool. And then yeah, it's kind of gone from there. I've now, like you said, I got a silver medal at last Commonwealth Games. I've been to multiple world and European senior championships, and then I won the European under 23s 2015. So yeah, it's been a pretty exciting few years, really. Like, my 9th year. Coming up in September will be 9 years. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind, because considering 10 years ago I didn't even know what weightlifting was. So yeah.
It's funny that you say about weightlifting being cool. So the standing joke is that I compete in powerlifting myself, but I think it's a lot more impressive when people are throwing weights above their head rather than potentially because there's so many federations in powerlifting. Competing in the IPF, yes, you've got to squat to a certain depth, but deadlifting, some crazy weights being lifted off the floor, but to have it above your head, the standing joke is, I'm the powerlifter that isn't that impressed by powerlifting. Weightlifting is. I think if I did try and do a snatch though, especially with benching, I don't think I've got the shoulder mobility for that.
Yeah,
but,
and that's the thing. Like with weightlifting, it's huge for women now, because I think a lot of them are finding it through CrossFit, which pros and cons to CrossFit, but it's done massive things for strength sports, and a lot of people are coming to it later just to generally keep fit, and the women are taking to the weightlifting easier because they're more mobile, whereas men have done years of bench press and bicep curls, and their upper bodies are just so tight that they then can't transfer to the weightlifting movements the same.
You've literally just said my entire program for the next couple of weeks now. We're just some curls. So you mentioned about your obviously training as an athlete. How did coaching come about? Was it something that obviously being at uni, did you want to go into coaching, or what was it?
I mean, it was never something I ever planned on doing. Like, I never planned on having the business like I do now. So when I was at uni, I was trained to be a PE teacher, and I then went into teaching, and I was teaching full time when I qualified for my first Commonwealth Games, and then I got a part-time role up at Ilkley, which was a really nice job. And then 2016 summer, I took the decision. Well, it was kind of a bit of both. So they were kind of getting rid of staff, but they offered me like another department if I could go and teach like PSHE or whatever. I was like, don't really fancy teaching sex ed. I just want to teach PE. And at the time we were funded, so I was like, well, I'm a funded athlete. Like, I'm going to make a proper go of this for the next cycle and stuff. So I stopped teaching, and then so that was in the summer, and then in the September after Rio, they cut all the funding for weightlifting. Right. So then I'm currently in a position, obviously, like there's no teaching jobs in September because schools are just going back, and I'm like, well, I'm in this position where I've got no job and I've got no funding. So what do I do? And I'd done bits of coaching before, like workshops and stuff, and I was like, look, I'm just gonna make the most of this. I can go back to teaching whenever. Like, I'm gonna try and be as much of a full-time athlete as possible. And it just kind of went from there, really. And as my sort of social media profile's grown too, like the programming and stuff has kind of grown with it. And I'm fortunate that because everything is online, like I do some workshops and stuff like on weekends and things, but the majority of my work and my income is online, so it means it can go with me wherever I go, like to competitions and stuff. I mean, last summer I spent 5 weeks in the States just training and stuff, which was cool, but I was still working and earning money. So yeah, I'm really fortunate that that's where I am, and I kind of did it at the start as a way to make money, but now like I actually really enjoy doing it. And I was kind of joking earlier, like I seem to end up as a bit of a counselor for some of my athletes. Like, you'll probably get it too, like they've got other stuff going on, and obviously that has a knock-on effect on training, and it's a little bit like teaching. Like, you're there obviously to teach the kids, but then you're also there as like a pastoral support, and you end up with the same connection with some of your athletes. And I mean, I've got athletes that I've never met, like they live across the globe, yet you still build that relationship and that trust with them. So yeah, it's really cool to have all the sides of it.
Yeah, there's that definition of a coach, isn't there? And there's a load of things underneath it. It's teacher, best friend, psychologist, and all that sort of stuff, which I think is really important. And with the teaching side of things, not everyone responds to the same cues, or not everyone responds to the same message. So I do find that interesting when you're working with a wide variety of clients.
Yeah, and I've had that from some of my athletes before. They've come from a different coach, and they're like, oh yeah, they just keep saying the same cue to me, and I wouldn't be able to understand it. And she's like, you've been through like 10 or 12 different ways to tell me the same thing, but you never gave up trying to like help me. And she was like, so like people before have really like just struggled, because she like struggles to understand stuff. So she's like, really thankful that, and I guess that is the teaching side of things. And I get that feedback from my workshops too. People are like, you break it down really simply, like step by step so that it's really easy to understand. So I guess that's kind of the teaching background.
Especially with a technical sport like weightlifting, I think sometimes you could get carried away with trying to make it as technical and
people try and overcomplicate weightlifting all the time.
Yeah, I'll try and even when I was at uni, I tried to make things as simple as I can, because if I can say it in simple terms, it makes me understand it as well and makes it a little better. So obviously you mentioned there, or you mentioned one of your sponsors, and I've seen that you've done a couple of workshops and trained with obviously Emily Campbell, who's been on the podcast. Obviously went to uni with Emily. I'm glad she remembered that as well, which would have been awkward on podcast. But in terms of obviously becoming more of a full-time athlete, how has it worked with sort of how do you manage your training now, and how has it worked with your sponsors so you've got more time to be able to train a little bit more?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate that I've got MiraFit and SBD, who both like give me like monetary sponsorship as well as like the equipment and stuff, which 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, was like unheard of in weightlifting, especially in Britain. So with the growth of strength sports, obviously the growth of sponsorship has come with it. So that's a massive thing, because like basically with those, that then covers my rent, so it kind of takes the stress off. Because I've been in a position previously where you are kind of scraping together, and you're overdrawn and everything else, and you're trying to make the most, and you're like, well, I've got this chance to be an athlete, like I'm going to do what I can. And it's getting there, like the more it grows. But I guess the frustrating thing is some of the other companies, like your Adidas and your Nike and everything else, they care more about these influencers. And I remember seeing like one of the Kardashians on like an Adidas like campaign, and I'm like, seriously, like there's athletes out there that are scraping the barrel to try and do what they can do. You're a sports brand and you're not even using athletes. But it's companies like SBD and MiraFit, like they're about finding people who fit their brand and fit the family. Because SBD is a family, and they choose who they sponsor based on whether they fit the brand, which is the kind of companies I want to be involved in. Like everyone would like a Nike or an Adidas deal or whatever else, but actually if you're supporting a small British brand and you're getting the same out of them, like I'd much rather pick them over a big brand, because you've got the relationship with them and everything like that. And it allows me to be, like you said, more full time. Like it's not enough that I don't have to work. I mean, you look at the American lifters, like so Kate Nye, for example, gets enough money through sponsorship and through their like government funding that her husband doesn't need to work. Wow. Like, yeah, it's madness. And I think it worked out like she would have got like $40,000 just from the World Championships, because you get money for every medal and money for a record. And yeah, it's nuts. I mean, they did the right thing with tapping into the CrossFit market and sharing like brands and stuff for their sponsorships for their athletes. But I mean, I'm not sure we'll ever get to that level, just because weightlifting is a minority sport and CrossFit isn't as big here as it is there. And but we are getting there. That it is allowing me to be more full time. So my working hours per day are like 3 hours, something like that. Like I get up in the morning, have my breakfast, I do my video feedback, I have my programs spread out, so I do like 2 a day, that I just like top up the 2 weeks or whatever they need doing, and then it spreads it out through the week. So I know some people do all their programs on one day, and I'm like, I just couldn't do that. Like it'd fry me. So yeah, then I do my programs in the morning, have my lunch, and go to the gym. And I recently moved down to Nottingham and training with Emily, and it's just good to have someone going through it with you, like when you're slogging for the same goal. And it has been a long slog for this Olympic qualification, because the qualification started back in November 2018. So now for that to extend potentially another 12 months is going to be difficult. And it is that mental side of it, to keep that brain ticking and pushing. And if you've got someone doing it with you, it is that little bit easier. And Em's a great laugh, so she keeps me smiling most days.
Good. So obviously, before we set up the podcast, obviously you sent over the days that you train, so obviously to work around that. Are those days always set in stone? Do you change them around? Has it changed over the time that you've become more of a sort of professional athlete, as you like?
I'd say they're pretty set in stone. So like I train 5 days a week. So I go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Friday, Saturday. That's just the way it's always been. I mean, I used to train less when I first started out. I mean, I get people who come to me for programming and they're like, yeah, I want to do 10 sessions a week. I want to do double sessions. I'm like, you realize I only do 5 sessions a week. I'm trying to go to the Olympics. Like, you don't need to be doing that many sessions to snatch 50 kilos. Like, it isn't going to make you better. Like, because the biggest thing in strength sports is recovery. And you talk about people who take the drugs and stuff, like they can train that much because they're taking the drugs. The drugs don't make them stronger, they make them recover. Like, and that's what people forget. So like as a clean athlete, you don't need to be doing more than that. And it pretty much has always stayed the same, like with those 5 sessions. So it tends to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday are like the heavier sessions, and then Tuesday and Saturday are more like not active recovery as such, but more like technical stuff, lighter weights. Like I won't tend to squat on those days and stuff like that. But if something comes up in my schedule, like if I've got to be somewhere for a meeting or for a sponsorship thing, then I can kind of move it around. And I guess that's the benefit of an individual sport, is you can move your sessions around and stuff, and it's not going to have that much of a knock on. Whereas obviously if you're in a team sport, you've got to be there for team practice. So yeah.
With that, just touching on the team sport, I know obviously was it over in Germany where you were doing a weightlifting?
Yeah.
Just, this is a complete tangent. How does even a weightlifting league work, and as a team? That's one question where I've been like, because obviously I used to play rugby, and it's sort of right. There's 10 teams in the league. You play home and away. Whoever scores the most points. How does a weightlifting league work?
So the league's the same in terms of you play X amount of teams.
Right.
So there's 3 points that the team can acquire per match. So 1 for snatch, 1 for clean and jerk, and 1 for total. And then it's a very efficient German formula. It's basically like a pound for pound formula, like a Sinclair or a Wilks or something like that. But you can compare men to women, whereas like Sinclair formula like doesn't work like that. So they've created their own thing. They actually do it in more like a round robin format, so more like a powerlifting format, whereas weightlifting is obviously normally ascending bar. So they split it into like 2 groups. So your first 3 lifters go against the other team's 3, just so the competition spreads out and it runs a bit faster. Yeah. So everyone snatches, and each lifter can get their points or whatever for snatch, then goes into the team total for the snatch point. Same for clean and jerk, and then obviously they get combined for the total, and then it's the team with the most points at the end. I think it's the top 3 teams going to the final, based off the league, and then they have like a head-to-head in the final, which would have been, I was really excited because it's my first time lifting in a first league team, like at one of the big teams this year, and I was really excited to lift in the final. They get like the stage lights going, like there's a crowd, and it's cool. It is more like a rugby match. Like there's a bar at the back at the club, and they're selling food, and everyone's there, and it's like a Saturday night. The lights are going. There's people with like big drums making noise. Like it is the weirdest thing, but it's so cool to have that environment for weightlifting. So obviously you just don't normally get that here. But the Germans actually do that for all their sports across the board. So like I know a few of the gymnasts that go out and compete in the league for them as well. So it's really cool, and for us as well, like we get paid to do that. So you get paid based on how much you lift. Like each club has a different formula depending on how much money they've got, which makes it a little bit like football basically. If you lift for one of the bigger teams, you get more money and everything else. So yeah, it's really cool for it to kind of work that way.
Maybe one day the money will be like football as well.
I tell you what, that'd be the dream, wouldn't it?
So with the days sort of set in stone for training, unless obviously I mentioned you need to change things around. And with when you mentioned the qualifications for the Olympics started in 2018, do you plan out with your coaches for the 2-year plan, or what? How does that sort of work?
I mean, so I changed coach in the middle of the block, which was pretty risky, but it was a case of I had to, given like some change in circumstances. But it's more a case of we aim to peak, like a big peak twice a year, so Europeans and Worlds. So you're always kind of working towards one of those, and then you'll do like a mini peak in between, say for like a British or something like that. Like I was in Rome in January for like a smaller qualification competition. So you can't. I mean, I'm never really involved in that process.
Right.
Kind of just leave it to coach. But yeah, it does work like that. It kind of works in the macro and mesocycles and stuff. And if we're more than 10 weeks out, then it'll be a bit more of a strength block. And if Cyril's really, really mean and you're a really long way out, it'll make you do like a Metcon for a couple of weeks, which 5x5 on clean and jerk is pretty gassy by the end on like a 60-second rest and stuff. So
do you prefer, because I know I always quite like asking this question, because a lot of the guests that I've had who are athletes themselves like to separate themselves. So when they're a coach, they're in coaching mode. When they're lifting themselves, they're just focusing on their own lifting. Do you prefer just taking a step back and just focusing on, well, obviously being an athlete yourself, and just putting that in the hands of your coach, or is there a little bit of discussion?
There is discussion, and I think that comes more now as I'm more experienced too. And as a coach myself, I coached myself for a little while last year too. So when I moved to Cyril, like there is that bit of discussion, and he'll send it over and say, "What do you think?" And as we're going through the block, we'll change things as well. Like if something's not working, like we'll change it. Or if I'm like, what, coach, this is beating me up too much. Like I need to step back a little bit. So there is that kind of discussion and transparency. And yeah, it is discussion, and like Cyril's good because he knows I'm experienced, and he also wants to challenge me as a coach, to sort of say, like, what do you think you need to work on, just to check that we're on the same page, and kind of work from there really.
Cool. And with the obviously you said you had a gymnastics background. Do you still keep up with that? Do you do that sort of on the or do a variation of it, just to sort of, as you mentioned, sort of if you've got a long period of time maybe between competitions, or it's quite a long prep, do you still keep up with gymnastics just to keep your mind ticking over and do something a little bit different?
Yeah, I mean, every now and then I'll like play around with stuff, but nothing like crazy skills, just because I'm clumsy at the best of times. So I'm like, I don't want to put myself at that injury risk.
Right.
But I'll play about with like gymnastics conditioning, so like handstands and walks and press up, like handstand press ups and stuff, and just kind of, move about and keep things exciting. And because otherwise it does get pretty boring doing the same old snatch, clean and jerk, squat, pull. Yeah.
Okay. So just one thing that you, and we said this right at the start of the podcast, of how technical weightlifting is. And one thing you mentioned at the start is just having a little bit more body awareness and controlling what you're doing. You mentioned that sometimes you might just have like a technique session. How important have you found it, and when you're coaching as well, to actually have sessions where you're just spending on technique, and what's the importance of that when it comes to getting stronger and setting PBs and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, to clarify what I mean by that, so like technical work for me would be nothing less than like 75%, because anyone can move the empty bar in the right way. Like I see people and they're like, oh yeah, I did empty bar for this meant like 10 sets of 10, and I really drilled my technique down. I'm like, right, that's fine, but as soon as you put 50% on, it's going to change, and as soon as you put 70, it's going to change again. So you've got to have enough weight on to be able to get that feedback from the bar, like being in the right place and stuff. So yeah, I'll kind of do that. And the thing is, like, technique is, you're always going to pick up bad habits. Like even as an experienced lifter, like there's still things that I'm working on and trying to change and stuff. And it's just good to have something different for your body as well. Like if you're lifting heavy, your CNS is just going to be shot. Like you can't keep lifting heavy like every day of the week. It's just not going to be good for your body or your brain. So it's good just to have that time. And I mean, since I've changed coach, I've done loads of different exercises, like technical exercises I wouldn't have done previously, like jerk recovery. So loading it up and getting yourself in that split position and then just standing up rather than doing the full movement of the jerk, and just stuff like that. And like even getting the blocks out and doing it like bottom up jerk, so starting from the bottom and driving straight up rather than doing the whole dip and drive. and just they're basically sessions just to change the stimulus a little bit, and just to keep it a little bit fresher. And like I said, it stops that kind of boredom setting in, of just doing the same movements. And things like, I wouldn't say I ever do like loads of light reps of snatch and clean and jerk, but things like muscle snatch, things like snatch balance, just drop into that bottom position. It's more kind of accessory work that develops technique as opposed to light of the lifts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it goes back to what you were saying. Sort of, if you're training five times a week, if you were lifting heavy 5 times, you'd be knackered. You just be knackered all the time. So that will help with the recovery side of things. And I'm glad you mentioned about when you're working on technique, it'll be a certain percentage of whatever your 1 rep max is, or whatever you're working in that day, just to or do different variations, like you say, for that stimulus. What's your thoughts on, because when it comes to anything, and when you mentioned, made me think about when you said with like an empty bar, or and just working through that. And a lot of people will say, oh, well, I'm just keeping it really, really light to work on technique. Whereas actually, like you said, putting a little bit of weight on. What have you found to be the recommendation for the percentage of weight that people might be using, or is there even any benefit to just using an empty bar?
I mean, like, obviously you should always try and move the empty bar like you move a lift. But that's a couple of sets in a warm up rather than like a whole session on it. Like, I'd say anything less than 70%, and you're not going to get that much benefit out of it, just because you can move those kind of weights pretty much how you want to move them. And also, you could be moving the weight wrong at that weight, but because you're strong, you're going to feel like it's a successful lift. Like, take a snatch, for example. Take me, if I can snatch 100 kilos, I could do 50 kilos and do it wrong, but because I'm strong, I'd be able to stabilize it overhead and stand up. But I could have screwed the lift up the whole way up, but because my shoulders are strong to able to put it there, then, that's why you need the weight to get that feedback, because the barbell takes no prisoners when it comes to things like snatch. Like, you've got a couple of millimeters of error, and it's gone if you're not within that range. So you need that weight to be able to drag you about, basically, if it is wrong, and then it's going to tell you that it was wrong. Whereas those lighter weights, if you're strong, especially for guys generally, like who've got a strength background. Like, I've got a couple of people who've programmed by me, who've done powerlifting before, so they're strong, so they can move that bar anyhow. But if it's too light, then they could just, you just get some people, they could basically like front raise it and put it over their head in a snatch grip, You've got to have that weight right, that it's going to teach you where it's got to be.
Is there a point where you can push it a little bit too much? So obviously, depending on how you've recovered and how you feel, is there some days where potentially when your technique work is going to be a little bit higher, or if you're feeling a little bit tired or beat up, might be a little bit lower? Can it be quite flexible, these technical sessions? Or?
Yeah, I always say a program's a guideline. It's not set in stone. We used to say it's like the Pirates Code, Pirates of the Caribbean. It's like, so it's more of a guideline. And you do have some days where you feel great, and then especially if you're building up to competition, if you're like within 4 weeks out, if it's a technical session and you feel like a superhero, then push it a little bit and take advantage of that, because you could then have a day that's supposed to be a heavy day and you feel like a bag of poop. And if you take advantage of the days that you feel good within reason, like if you are building up to competition, then do it. And then what I say to my athletes is, as long as they stick to the sets and reps, I don't mind if they push it a little bit. But if you're in a volume phase and you stick a 1 rep max on the bar, like, I'm gonna shout at you. So, but if you're in a volume phase and you're doing 5s and you're like, what, I could get a 5 rep PB, then go for it. Just using it and being smart. And I guess the more experience you get, the more you're going to learn that. But on the opposite side of it, like, if you have to take the program down, then do it. Like, successful lifts make you strong, failed lifts don't. So you're better off doing light reps and getting them, rather than doing heavy ones and just missing them.
Absolutely. There's a lot more benefit of, because I've said it to other people before, of sometimes even in the same workout, they've done a couple of sets with one weight, but form's maybe breaking down a little bit, or they're looking a little bit tired. I've said, you can drop the weight down again. We want to make sure that, especially for strength sports, you want to be as efficient as you can, rather than just wasting energy. From your point of view, with the new sort of variations you've been using, how have you found that improve your lifting? Is there, have you started? Has that helped your snatch and clean and jerk? Are you lifting a little bit more?
Yeah, definitely. Especially like my jerk, we've made a lot of technical changes there. And I got a PB last Friday, the one before. I hit 128, which puts me at the double body weight marker for clean and jerk, which is pretty cool. So yeah, like that's been the biggest change. The rest of it, there's been a couple of tweaks with my other stuff where bad habits had crept in, where I was training on my own with nobody watching me and stuff like that. So we've kind of tweaked things back to where they used to be. But yeah, it's that change of stimulus. Like you get strength improvement and changes from a change in stimulus, and just having a different program and different exercises. Because the way I've been programmed previous has always been the same, like same sort of exercise, because it was the same coach. So that even when I program for myself, like I've already known that way of training, so I carried it on similar. So having that change has been really good, just to try different things, and having a coach in front of you. Like this is the first time I've ever really had a coach in front of me as well, like constantly watching me and stuff. So to have that, like, okay, that didn't work, let's try this. And within a session, just like the sessions being quite fluid and moving things around a little bit. So it's been really beneficial for sure.
Cool. I do find that quite interesting, because the coach I'm with now, I think I've been with for the last year, and I've lifted the heaviest. I get training sent weekly, which really helps me, and there's a little bit more feedback. But before that, I signed up to maybe every programming that you can, just to try out and just see how it was. And I know when I'm programming for other people, what might not have worked for me from one thing, I could pick it from there and be like, all right, okay, let's give this a go. How much have you found with the clients and athletes that you work with at sort of the amateur level, if you like? How much benefit have you found with implementing those technique sessions?
Yeah, I think my athletes have definitely seen a bit of a change in like my programming, especially some of my ones that have been moved for a long time. Like we've made a few changes and a few different ways of doing things, and it's just like me changing coaches had an effect on me as an athlete and a coach, because it's just taught me more. I mean, I've always tried to learn from coaches as I kind of have gone around the country and everything else, even though they've not been like my coach. So yeah, it's been cool to do that and to try different things, and even just hearing slightly different ways of like explaining stuff as well has really helped my coaching. And I think, like you're saying about programming and trying loads of different things, like you could have the best coach in the world and have the best program in the world, but if you don't believe in it and you don't trust it, then you're not going to make improvements. Whereas you could have a terrible program, a terrible coach, but if you believe in them, then it's going to work. That's just one of those things and I think, like, I've had athletes come and go, and I've had people come to me and pay me for a program, and then they're constantly challenging me and my knowledge, and I'm like, why are you paying me if you think you know better? Like, and it's just frustrating as a coach. Like I appreciate people asking me like, oh, why am I doing that, or what's this to develop and stuff, but when people are arguing with you about it, I'm like, you're not worth the money you're paying me. Like,
it's I quite like being asked questions.
Me too.
And if that was the whole reason why I set up this podcast, because people ask me questions, and I thought I don't have enough answer. And in all honesty, I thought when I sent emails out, no one would reply to me. But yeah, 100 odd episodes later, I'm quite glad and thankful for how it's gone. But I'll go out and find the answers. But what I usually say is if you're arguing on the methods, either go find another coach, or if you took your car into a garage or went to a doctor, you'd sort of, you wouldn't be like, well, I think we need to have I think it's surgery that we need. Whereas actually, you trust their judgment a little bit. I do believe in that you've got to believe in the principles that you have with the coach and help you develop. So obviously we've chatted a lot about the weightlifting side of things, and something that might be potentially people might think is the complete opposite of weightlifting is obviously competing in pageants as well. So now for me, we mentioned it a little bit about women getting involved in strength sports. With the powerlifting club that I run, most of the people there are actually women compared to men, which I think is which is awesome. And quite a lot of the women are actually getting into wanting to compete a little bit more so than actually some of the fellas, which is good to see. Now, the opposite of that, how did you get involved in the pageant side of things? How does that manage with weightlifting? How did that
I mean, it all kind of happened a little bit by chance. So I was a student at Leeds Met at the time. It's now Beckett, and I was working in the Three Horseshoes pub at the bottom of the road on Headingley at the start of the run. And there was an advertisement in the local magazine. It was like the Leeds Guide for entries for Miss Leeds. And I was behind the bar, and the Horseshoes is a bit of like an old man pub, so you have like your regulars and stuff that go in, and they're looking at it and they're like, you should do it, Sarah, you should do it. And I was like, no, don't be daft. And then so I put an entry in just to kind of like appease everybody, and then one thing led to another, and I ended up doing Miss Leeds, and then I ended up winning and then going to Miss England finals. And I mean, those two were a complete whirlwind, and I was drowning, like I was out of my depth completely. And then I stepped away from it for a little while and was like, actually, I miss doing that. Like, I miss having something other than weightlifting. And I realized I could use it as another platform to kind of put myself out there as a role model, I guess. So the background is as a gymnast, when I started like high school, I was bullied for being muscly because I was like, 11, 12 years old, and I was shredded. Like, I'm talking 8-pack and pecs, like sub 10% body fat, like, which obviously at high school isn't normal. So then you get bullied for it because that's, the way that the bullying works if you do something different. So I guess part of the reason I do it is to prove to like 12-year-old me, but also if there's somebody else out there in that position, they can actually go, you know what, like I can do this. And I'm more muscly now than I was then. I'm more happy in my body now than I was then. So to prove to people that you can lift weights, you can have muscle and still look like a woman. And obviously as you grow up and you go through puberty as a woman, you're still going to end up with a womanly figure. And at the minute everyone wants a Kim Kardashian bum, and you're only going to get that from doing squats or going to see a very good surgeon. So squats are cheaper.
Yeah, I think that's going to be that can be the tagline of the podcast there. Squats cheaper. Why I asked that question is so obviously with quite a lot of women now getting involved in strength sports, and yes, they all want to lift heavier, but there's always that question of I don't want to get too big, or I don't want to get too I sit down and I'll chat with my clients, and obviously I don't really have a womanly figure. They don't really want to look like me, but as a sort of male coach, to get the point across that actually look, you're not gonna look like you're not gonna get too muscly. It's not going to. It's not a negative thing.
Because people have the perception, and they see the women who take all the drugs and stuff, which obviously does affect you and does give you a more manly figure because you're pumping yourself full of male hormones and everything else. So if you're not doing that, then you're still going to look like a woman.
Yeah. How have you have you had any dealings of that with your clients? Because obviously I know for me, I try and put a little bit more emphasis on the strength side of things, and I'll put some because a lot of women will come in. I'll be like, right, what's the goals? Well, I want to get stronger. What about this? And then actually when you get to it, it's like Yeah, I want a bigger bum. I want a smaller waist. I want my arms to
Mhm.
look a little bit better. Okay, let's throw some hip thrust, glute bridges. Let's do some arm exercises in there. How do you go about sort of putting that putting that across?
Yeah, I mean, generally, like people come to me and my programming for the weightlifting side of things, but obviously, where I do compete in the pageants, I get all the pageant girls being like, "How do I do this and how do I do that?" And it's about like educating them on if you want those things, like being a cardio bunny isn't going to do it. Like if you want to have curves, you've got to build the muscle to create them.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, you want to fill the skin up basically with muscle, and that's going to create the things that you want. Like taking the fat away and taking muscle away is going to have the opposite effect.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, I do get a lot of it from like the pageant girls and stuff. And if I had more time, like I probably would do more programming with clients like that. But at the minute, I just kind of give them out like kind of free advice on, like you said, doing the squats and the hip thrusts and, you know, some more like weighted machines and things like that. And you know, it's kind of cool to see the pageant industry change as well. Because obviously you look back 10 years, 15 years in pageants, and it was about being as skinny as possible and the size 0 and all of that. Whereas now you look at, you know, some of the big names in pageants, and they do clearly work out. Like you can see quad definition, you can see ab definition. And they kind of, the good pageant girls now look more like I think it's like bikini, like, you know, the bodybuilding, like the smaller end of the women. I don't know my technical terms on that one, I'm afraid, but they look more like those kind of girls and could probably get on one of those stages because they're in that kind of shape. And pageants now are about being a positive role model as opposed to just being a pretty face. So it is about like, does this person look like they lead a healthy lifestyle? Are they someone that I'd want my daughter to look up to? And, you know, kind of that side of things. So it's cool that that's changing and seeing that difference in that industry too, because at first I was like, maybe it's just the people that I'm surrounding myself with weightlifting that, you know, women's body image is changing, but actually to see it on the complete flip side of the coin, that, you know, that people are wanting to see those changes in that world too is really kind of cool.
Yeah, it goes back to just touching on what you mentioned about sort of with like Nike and Adidas, just sort of just being influencers, but it's still got to, like what you say there, you still got to be a role model. You still have to give those principles out there. How have you found that to be a nice distraction to take your mind off weightlifting sometimes?
Yeah, that's exactly, like, from a selfish point of view, why I do it, because especially now that my job is weightlifting too, like you become fully absorbed in it, and from a mental like health perspective, like it's so difficult to keep your head in that kind of game all the time. So it's really cool just to get away from it all and you know, get out of my leggings and all of that kind of stuff and surround myself in a completely different environment. And the way I kind of describe it to people is weightlifting is my job now and pageants are my hobby. Because weightlifting, like, not that it's no longer a hobby, because I still enjoy it, and like I wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy it, but I need something to get away and to switch off. So
I find that interesting because I'm not a professional athlete, but when you hear other athletes that obviously mentioning that is their job. I know one guy. He was a player for Leicester Tigers in rugby union. I think he's actually emigrated to Australia now. He just made skateboards. He likes skateboarding, and he just used to sell those just because it's something completely different.
And it's like you'll find most athletes when they go to university won't study sport. They'll study something completely different because they want to be away from sport and have that time, you know, away from it all, just to keep their heads a little bit clearer and stuff.
Cool. So quite a lot of topics covered there. Really, really enjoyed chatting with you. For everyone listening who either might have any questions about training or technique, or just want to reach out and ask you any questions, where can people find you or get in touch with you?
So my business is Wisdom for Weightlifting. So we find that on Instagram. It's Wisdom and then the number 4 weightlifting. Send a question on there. That's where you can find out about programming and stuff too, through the website. And then for me personally, my Instagram is @SarahD_GB. And if you want to send me a message there to ask about anything, like I always make a point to reply to everybody. You know, I get some people that message me like, I can't believe you replied. And I'm like, I'm not just going to ignore you. Like, so yeah.
Cool. Thanks a lot for taking the time to chat with me. Thanks a lot to everyone listening. I hope you all enjoyed that as much as I did. And I will see you all next week.